Welcome to our next Leading in the Context of COVID-19 and Beyond Bite Size. This time we're focusing on coaching. Last time we explored learning from COVID-19 and making positive choices about what we wanted to retain from our experiences of the pandemic. This time we're going to look at the way you can support yourself and those around you to do just that, and that's through coaching. Some people consider coaching as a method or a set of tools. Whilst it is both of these things, for me, coaching is also a state of mind and a way of being when you're interacting with others. As leaders, we know that leadership is about the impact our actions and behaviours have on others. And as John Quincy Adams says, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. Coaching is similar and at the same time different. Coaching has the power to remind people that they're not alone with their problems and that their concerns are important, while simultaneously empowering them to take ownership of their challenges and responsibility for their actions. It's certainly about the impact that our actions have on others. It's also about what we believe about others and how this belief is reflected in the way that we behave. A useful way to contextualize this is with Franklin Ernst's OK Corral. So OK Corral was developed by Franklin Ernst and has its roots in transactional analysis. Ernst believed that in all relationships, whether in the past and into the future, we make decisions about the type of relationship it may be. Our judgments are often subconscious and may be related to some of our beliefs or previous experiences. Ernst found that we make judgments about two things: ourselves and our okayness in the relationship, i.e. whether I'm okay or I'm not okay, and the other, that Ernst labelled as you, which leads us to either you're okay or you're not okay. From those two decisions, we place ourselves within one of the four quadrants of the OK Corral, which will be represented by our behaviour. Coaching sits firmly in I'm okay, you're okay. Before we explore it in more detail, let's visit the other quadrants to give it some context. So starting with I'm okay and you're not okay. This is where our behaviour, consciously or unconsciously, is either driven by the belief that we are okay and the other is not, or the impact of our behaviour results in the other person not being okay. Ernst came up with two labels for the behaviours in this quadrant, and they were rescuer and persecutor. Notice these are labels for the behaviours, not for the individuals that deploy them. So rescuer, this is the behaviour when we're being helpful, when we make suggestions and do things for other people. Notice when we make a suggestion, no matter how well intentioned, we're demonstrating our belief that the other person is unable to do it for themselves. Persecutor, this behaviour is when we're critical or aggressive. Inappropriate or excessive command and control leadership style could also sit in this quadrant. Let's look at the opposite quadrant, which is about you're okay and I'm not. The label that Ernst used for this behaviour was victim. Whilst we may demonstrate these behaviours, inadequacy, helplessness, etc., ourselves, in relation to coaching, it's useful for us to look out for them in others, because they can tempt us into the well-intentioned rescuing as they lead us to believe that the other is not okay, which we will then either influence or reinforce through our rescuer behaviour. Ernst didn't have a label for this final quadrant for I'm not okay, you're not okay. Others have labelled it dropout because no one is okay here. So if you want to know more about OK Corral, check out the Real Bite Size video and handout on the internet by searching Real Bite Size. I mentioned at the beginning of this bite size that I consider coaching as a state of mind and a way of being when you're interacting with others. Coaching sits firmly in I'm okay, you're okay, and the relationship behaviours that sit in the I'm okay, you're okay quadrant represent this. So these are equality, respect, honesty, positive regard, curiosity, and optimism, which overall also reflect a coaching approach. As Timothy Galway, the author of The Inner Game of Tennis, says, coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. It's helping them learn rather than teaching them. No one will have all of the answers all of the time. Hence, the power coaching people enables us to support them to actively problem solve and face up to their challenges without leaving them feeling like they've been left to sink or swim. Now, in her book, More Time to Think, Nancy Kline suggests 4 questions for us to ask ourselves to support us in accessing a coaching mindset. So she asks us to think about, how far can you go in your own good thinking before you need mine? How much further can you go than that? How much further than that? And how much further even than that? So notice this is about us resisting, helping, guiding, giving suggestions, because it's about believing the other person has their own good thinking. What this does in turn then is support us to support those around us to go to the unexplored edge of their thinking, or as Kline says, if you encourage people, build with them their courage to go to the unexplored edge of their thinking by championing their excellence, they will think better around you. And that's what coaching gives us. It enables us to support those around us to think better about what's going on for them. Now notice, to unlock a person's potential, as Galway would describe it, you have to believe in their potential, their ability to solve their own problems and come up with their own solutions. This is one of the fundamental elements of coaching, an unconditional positive regard for and belief in the potential of the other, which truly comes from an I'm okay, you're okay perspective. So Nancy Kline, you already know she's the author of More Time to Think and a book called Time to Think. We mentioned her in The Power of Listening Bite Size on the 4th of June. Reminds us that our role is to support people to think for themselves. Even when they ask explicitly for our help, she says help is a funny thing. We usually think of it as giving people ideas and suggestions. Real help is giving people a framework in which to generate their own ideas first. So one way to create a coaching environment is by using, in a deliberate and conscious way, 2 skills we've been using since we were children: questioning and listening. So let's revisit questioning first, because you can see here, questions open the door to dialogue and discovery. They're an invitation to creativity and breakthrough thinking. Whilst we ask and respond to questions multiple times each day, to coach effectively, it's useful to bring the types of questions we ask back into our conscious mind so that we can make considered choices about which questions to ask, when, and for what reason. So our 2 main choices in terms of question are open questions, which broaden and deepen people's thinking, and closed questions, which tend to narrow people's attention to the point that it can limit their thinking to a binary choice of yes or no. I've represented it as a funnel because it's about us having a finite amount of time, and we want to start in a broad way and then increase the focus over time. So in terms of our open questions, our options are what and how, which are our broadest scope questions. When that scope narrows a little, we then get when, where, who, and which, and we also have the option of why. So the 2 that are going to do the most work for us are what and how. And the one that I want you to avoid asking is why. When we ask a why question, what it does is tends to generate a requirement for people to justify or defend themselves, which is really not useful, particularly in a coaching environment. Now, open questions become even more powerful when they're combined with silence and attention, so our listening. If we want to coach effectively, we'll want to increase our own comfort with silence. In terms of closed questions, the options then are do or did, have or had, is or are, will or would, can or could, or shall or should. So these tend to generate a yes or no response and are really useful towards the end of our conversations when we're looking to bring a conversation to a close or generate some sense of confirmation. So is there anything else you want to talk about? Will generate a straight yes or no. Now, whilst questions are useful, what we do after we've asked them is equally important, and that is listening. The most basic and powerful way to connect to another person is to listen. Just listen. In coaching, I think about questioning and listening as being like heads and tails on the same coin. If you ask great questions, you get to hear the other person's thinking, and they get to hear their own thinking too. And by listening to that thinking, the individual gets the chance to see and hear their thinking from a different perspective, and we get the chance to choose our next question to support them in going to that, as Klein would describe it, unexplored edges of their thinking. When we're listening, it's useful to remember the work of Albert Mehrabian that we introduced as part of the Bite Size on the Power of Listening on the 4th of June. If this represents how we communicate, then it also provides a useful framework for our listening. When we listen effectively, we pay attention to all of these things while staying silent. As the Greek philosopher Epictetus says, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Coaching involves us combining our skills of questioning and listening effectively to, as Galway described it, to unlock their potential to maximize their own performance. If that's what coaching is, we can also think about how we do it, which is what we're going to look at now to bring this bite size towards a close. In their book, Helping People Change, Coaching with Compassion for Lifelong Learning and Growth, Boyatzis, Smith and Van Oosten explain that the way we can help someone learn and change cannot be focused primarily on fixing problems. Instead, it must connect to that person's positive vision of themselves. They show how a distinctly positive mode of coaching that they call coaching with compassion opens people up to thinking creatively and helps them to learn and grow in meaningful and sustainable ways. This builds on the compassionate leadership that we explored in our bite size on the 21st of May. We have more opportunities to lead and coach with compassion than we often realise. Coaching compassionately requires us to be intentional about being aware of both ourselves and others, and the REACH mnemonic provides useful guidance to support us. R is about resonance, creating a supportive, trusting, positive relationship in which we're focused on the other person over ourselves, which builds really nicely on the building and maintaining trust bite size on the 14th of May. E is for empathy, shifting our concern from wanting to be understood to understanding others. A is about awareness. Before we can help others, we need to be clear on our mindset and emotions and their impact on the environment around us. So we looked at this in relation to emotional intelligence during the supporting transition bite size on the 18th of June. It's also about compassion. When we demonstrate compassion in helping roles, we listen and respond to the emotions beyond the person's words. And finally, hope. We unleash positive emotions and uplift ourselves when we help them to envision a brighter and better future, which links really nicely with last week's bite size on learning and looking forward on the 2nd of July. So, now what? Hearing about coaching is one thing. The real benefit comes in doing it. A recurring theme throughout the bite sizes has been the importance and value of us role modelling the behaviours we want and expect from others. That goes for us being willing to be vulnerable too, for us taking the risk of trying out a new skill with a real chance that we will mess it up, and our readiness to admit when we do. That's called learning, by the way. Or as Cheryl Cole says, I've learned so much from my mistakes, I'm thinking of making some more. Who knew I'd be quoting Cheryl Cole? With this in mind, think about when and how you will practice coaching. So, firstly, what benefits do you want to achieve through coaching? That will give you a reason to do it. What opportunities will you make or take to practice it? Who might be a useful person to start with? If you were going to run a marathon, you wouldn't do the whole lot on your first try. Pick somebody that might be gentler and easier to work with. When will you do it? When are you going to commit to yourself you will take this action? Who will you share your experiences with? So it's about reflecting and learning from what's gone on. And also, it might be useful for you to be a receiver of coaching too. So who could you receive coaching from? Bite size then. Coaching is as much a state of mind and a way of being as it is a method or set of tools. It sits firmly in the I'm okay, you're okay quadrant of the OK Corral. It's about taking people to the unexplored edge of their thinking by being curious about how far they can go in their own thinking before they need ours. It combines questioning and listening like heads and tails on a coin. We can coach compassionately using reach, and remember, practice makes permanent. So finally, as usual, here are links to all of the other areas of support that are available to you as a leader, and the link to give us some feedback on your experiences of these bite size. Also support from the broader NHS. I look forward to working with you next time.